Hello everyone, and welcome to the ASMR review show. For this video, I'd like to talk about some songs and albums that I've been listening to recently. Sort of a what's on my playlist video of sorts. Now, the first few songs I'm going to talk about are all related to some movies that I've seen recently, and those are Dunkirk, Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, and Baby Driver. So in a way, this first part is going to be a sort of mini review collection of these three films. I'm going to keep the details brief and it will be spoiler free. But if you still don't want to hear anything about either of these three movies, know that I recommend all of them and you can skip to this point in the video. With that all being said, let's begin. The first song on my playlist is The Oil by Hans Zimmer. This is one of the many brilliantly designed soundtracks to Dunkirk. Now, I personally loved this movie a lot. I thought it was a very intense ride from start to finish, and the soundtrack really helps give this heightened sense of urgency, as many of the elements to it feature high-pitched whining and ticking clocks, and this gives this sense that the planes are always overhead and that everything is constantly moving, constantly going on, and this persists for almost the entirety of the film. And I won't talk about the scene that the song plays in, but if you've seen the film, you know which scene it is, and you know why I've had that constantly playing. The film is told in a non-linear perspective following three stories on the land, the air, and the sea, and they're intercut in a very unique way so that no matter what, there's always a very tense point of one of the three stories being told. And I really liked this aspect because it meant that you were always on the edge of your seat, and overall it's just this really well done element, the way everything flows together. So I would recommend Dunkirk. There isn't much to characterization in the film, but then again it's not always been Nolan's strongest suit, so I think it was acceptable for that area to be a little lacking when the rest of the spectacle and thrill ride is just done so well. And yes, Hans Zimmer's score, definitely worth listening to. The next song on my playlist is Hocus Pocus by Focus. Now, this is a song that I've been listening to for a very long time, probably since I had my first Walkman. If I had to do my own awesome mix, Guardians of the Galaxy style, that would be one of the songs that I would have on a cassette tape. And this song was recently used during an action sequence in Baby Driver. I won't go into any details about the scene, but if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. Edgar Wright did a very great job of directing this movie. It is a very sort of run-of-the-mill standard action film, but all of the chase sequences, the car moments, they're done very, very well because there's very little, I don't think any CG used whatsoever, so everything feels real. But at the same time, a lot of the scenes are intercut with popular songs, as the way he would normally like to do with stuff like Shaun of the Dead. And in particular, the scene with Hocus Pocus, a song that I love, being used in an action scene it's really great. It's fantastic. If I had any sort of criticism for the movie, it would be that I didn't feel that it was like sort of unique in a way, if that makes sense. What I mean by that is that Shaun of the Dead and his other type of movies were really great spoofs of popular genres like zombie films, but this was just an action movie. That's not necessarily a negative, just more of an observation, but overall, the film is still very good. And the song Hocus Pocus, with its blistering guitar riffs and shredding solos and yodeling and accordions and flutes, it's just all kinds of craziness wrapped up into this one song that just makes for such a perfect music movie moment. The next song on my list is Space Oddity by David Bowie. I've known this song for a very long time as well, and it is used to great effect in the opening credits of Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. The story of Valerian is that over the years, alien species would come to Earth to meet and join forces and create this giant space station like the Citadel from Mass Effect, but on a much larger scale, with all different kinds of cultures intertwined together. And so the opening credits show this in a really great montage, and this montage is set to Space Oddity, which as on its own is a fantastic song with this 1960s psychedelic feel, but also this hopefulness of outer space exploration. And this 1960s optimism is set to this scene in the film, and it makes for a really great intro. The film as it is overall is pretty good. This was by Luc Besson, who also did The Fifth Element, and I would compare these two in that they're not really like amazingly in-depth, inventive stories. They are very silly and fun when you get to the heart of the premise, and they are definitely very weird due to the more French European aspects of storytelling. But there's a lot of really ingenious creativity in all of the designs for the alien creatures, the planets, the worlds, and that really is where the film shines. So, much like The Fifth Element, I enjoy the movie for its unique style and its weirdness. The characters may not be amazing, but overall I would still watch it again, and I hope this is one that more people can appreciate in the coming years. And of course, this opening montage is just so well done. It really sets the tone for the film. So, with all those reviews done, let's get on to talking about some more music. Next song on my playlist is Shadow Play by The Killers. This is a cover of the Joy Division song of the same name, though I'm embarrassed to admit that when I first listened to this, I didn't realize it was a cover of the Joy Division song. I merely thought it was a song that sounded similar to Joy Division and shared the same title. So that was definitely a music critic fail on my part. I haven't listened to many full albums by The Killers. I selected this song to sort of represent the iTunes playlist that I listened to. And that has a lot of their other big hits on there, like Mr. Brightside and When We Were Young. The Killers definitely have a sound that I could see evolving from bands like Joy Division with some 80s influences, and I do like their style. They aren't necessarily a favorite of mine, but I'm hoping that there are more songs done in this Joy Division style, and if there are any, feel free to let me know. The next song on my playlist is Miami 2017, Seen the Lights Go Down on Broadway by Billy Joel. This is from the album Turnstiles, which I have had on endless repeat for these past few weeks. I'm a big fan of the album The Stranger, but I hadn't really listened to many other full albums by Billy Joel until now. Turnstiles was the one that he did before The Stranger, and it's just such a really great album. He has such a really great voice, and his interesting way of telling stories in song. It always comes across so well. He's the piano man. And I picked Miami 2017 to represent this album because I just like the sort of post-apocalyptic pseudo-sci-fi element. It's meant to be about the imminent destruction of New York, because at the time it was in shambles back in 1976. Although it really is interesting too, now in the current year, 2017, able to look back on that song as a piece of history. And it was also really awesome that Billy Joel was able to get to play that song live in Miami at the start of 2017. So it'll be interesting years from now to look back at that song as this ancient history. But overall, it's just such a really great driving beat to it. There's a bit of a pessimistic feel, but at the same time, there is this optimism of trying to keep stories of the past alive and show how the important events have shaped our lives. The next song on my playlist is Beds Are Burning by Midnight Oil. This is from the album Diesel and Dust. Midnight Oil, they're Australian, and I kind of liken their sound to basically being the Australian version of U2. Their songs are politically charged, but with sort of a alternative sound to them. And Beds Are Burning is about the importance of recognizing that much of the land is claimed by settlers and should rightfully belong to the First Nations that it was taken from in many unjust or sort of manipulative ways. And I always felt that this song started with a few power chords that remind me of the Pixies for some reason. Perhaps I'm thinking of the song Monkey Gone to Heaven, though that song was a few years later, if my mathematics are correct. The entire album is good and has many other politically charged songs such as Bulldozer. And another album by Midnight Oil that I've not really fully listened to yet is Blue Sky Mine. I've listened to the title track, and that one is also very good. But it's a band that I'd like to listen to more of to get into this these 80s type bands where maybe they were considered one-hit wonders, but they actually have a lot more in their back catalog. And on that topic, that brings me to the next song on my playlist, which is Train of Thought by Aha. This is from the album Hunting High and Low, which features everybody's favorite internet meme song, Take On Me. Now, I picked a Train of Thought to represent the album because it's definitely a song that I think showcases a good side of Aha, having this very synthetic feel to it, this 80s new wave sound, but with some sort of naturalistic elements in there, such as I believe it's like a pan flute that sort of plays the lead medley over top of the intro drum beat. Aha is a band that I think is a lot more than just a one-hit wonder. Perhaps, people who listen to them more in the day would consider them more than that, but at least from my understanding of sort of the generation today, they really only seem to know them for Take On Me, and even then that seems to have this place as a more joke, parody type silly song. But I think it's important to look past that, because Hunting High and Low is a legitimately great album, and there's many, many great arrangements on there. It's all comes together so perfectly. So, the next song on my playlist is The Cell by Gojira. Now, Gojira is a French death metal, technical death metal, groove metal. I'm not really good with subgenres, but they're a metal band. And for the longest time, I had only ever listened to the song Global Warming from the fantastic album From Mars to Sirius. But after I heard that their new album was influenced by the death of the two main members' mother, since they're brothers, I decided to actually listen to this album, Magma, and there is a lot more sort of emotion and pain that's gone into making this album, and it really reflects well in the music. And I think getting into this album allowed me to go back to their earlier stuff and appreciate it a lot more. My current favorite song from the album, which is on the playlist, is The Cell. It's just got a really great intro that is fast with this almost blast beat like rhythm, but the main verses have a really hard driving melody to them. And my favorite part of the song is near the end when the guitar riff is played over just simply the kick drum, and their lead singer, his vocals are just so powerful. There's so much energy to them. So Gojira is definitely a band that I'm glad I've finally been able to truly get into, appreciate, and I can't wait to listen to more of their music. The next song on my playlist is Below by White Lung. White Lung is a band that I've heard about for a few years but never really actually listened to properly until recently. And while I know their earlier stuff may be a bit more weird and out there, their newest album, Paradise, I think is a really great blend of this indie rock but also punk feel to it, because the songs don't really sound like traditional punk music, but there still are elements of punk, such as very fast drum beats and very heavy guitar, but it's done in this unique way with lots of whammy pedal effects and very interesting leads. And while Below is more of the ballad song on the album, that is to say, it's not as hard, straight up punk as other songs, I do really like the way that the arrangement all builds to a great crescendo. And their singer also kind of sounds like Lady Gaga, which in this case is a good thing because I'm not the biggest fan of her music, but she does have a good voice. So to be able to get the Lady Gaga voice, but with music that I like, is a good combination. The next song on my playlist is The Violence by Rise Against. This is from their new album, Wolves. Now, Rise Against has never been a band to shy away from having important political messages to say. And with the very divided situation in America right now, they've had a lot of material to work with, and it really shows on their new album. It feels very inspired, like they really care about what they want to say. And regardless of whether or not you agree with them, they definitely are very passionate, and that is always important in music, to be passionate about what you're playing. Specifically, The Violence, it's more of a general song about this idea of whether or not violence is in human nature. And it's a very interesting topic. And the album still continues along the sound that they're working on. It's comparable to their previous album, The Black Market. So unfortunately, if you're not a fan of their new sound, I don't think this will win you over. But if you like the direction that they're going, then it's definitely a good way. Other highlights on the album are How Many Walls and Welcome to the Breakdown. So overall, it's a very tight arrangement. They know what they're good at doing, and they've stuck to that, but they do have something very interesting to say, and it's worth listening to. The next song on my playlist is Everything Now by Arcade Fire. Now, this is, of course, from their new and slightly controversial album, because, how shall I say, it's a very upfront dance pop type record. Many comparisons have been made to something like ABBA, but only in modern day. Now, it's a little hard for me to to judge this, because when it comes to music, you have to look at the music itself, but in some cases you do also need to compare it to an artist's past work, because this allows us to see their evolution. So yes, this album is very different from Funeral and Neon Bible, and it does continue along the trend of the more dancey Reflector, and it is very stylized. And while this may have been more tongue-in-cheek, it was intentional. But I still think it's interesting. Arcade Fire, they're a band where it always has taken me a few listens to truly get their sound. But at the same time, it is fun, danceable music. It's just perhaps we wanted a little more from Arcade Fire than just that. But nevertheless, it's on my playlist. I've been listening to it a lot. Everything Now is a fun song, and so is the next track after that, Signs of Life. The next song on my playlist is Hard Times by Paramore. Now, Paramore is a band that has very slightly changed style over each album. It was a lot more noticeable with the 2013 self-titled album, and that was one I was not a fan of at release, but over the years I've come to appreciate it more, and there's a lot of good material on there. Now, this new album, After Laughter, it's completely different in that this isn't like an angsty, punk type record you'd listen to with your headphones while sitting alone in high school or something like that. This is very fun, danceable music with a lot of influences from 80s bands like Talking Heads, but lyric-wise, it might actually be their darkest. Almost every song is full of misery and sorrow and regret, so it's a very nice balance. It's something I've always liked in the music of Steven Wilson, which we will get into later. So I still recommend it. Again, it's one where you have to distance yourself slightly from the artist's past work. You have to look at that for comparison, but taking it on its own, I do like the sound that they went for, and I think the arrangements turned out very nicely. Although it is kind of sad to think that just after this album, which is all about misery and heartbreak and how things aren't going to get better, that Hayley Williams did go through a breakup. That is very unfortunate timing indeed. The next song on my playlist is The Last Refugee by Roger Waters, and this is from his new album, Is This the Life We Really Want? Similar to Rise Against, Roger Waters has never been one to be silent on his political views. It's something that was present in Pink Floyd's music since the earliest days, with songs like Corporal Clegg off of the Saucerful of Secrets album. Obviously, The Wall is an incredibly political album, and if you saw anything whatsoever from his Wall tour over the last several years, you know that he had many political messages throughout, with all of the show aspects to the concert. So, this trend has continued with this new album, and The Last Refugee is about the plight of refugees escaping war-torn countries. And this album sort of surprised me, because from what I heard leading up to it, it sounded a little too much like discount Pink Floyd songs. But having listened to the whole thing, there's enough new material in there to justify the existence of this album. Also, lyric-wise, the passion that Roger Waters has about a lot of recent events gives a bit of a new flavor to these songs. And in a way, I almost feel like the connections to other Pink Floyd songs was intentional to get you to remember, okay, this riff is from Sheep, off of Animals. Now, what was that song about? how does that change over the years to this one? But then again, perhaps I'm just trying to rationalize a lack of creativity. That's obviously up for the listener to decide. The next song on my playlist is Sweet by Cigarettes After Sex. I don't know too much about cigarettes after sex. Phrasing. But let it be known that they're a very nice, chill, relaxing band to listen to. The name does really properly fit with their sound. And despite the fact that they may have some very dark lyrics, the overall sort of sound of the band gives this very nice, warm feeling. So it's a very nice, chill album if you're looking for music to relax. If, of course, ASMR is not your thing, then I would recommend their debut album. The next song on my playlist is Pariah by Steven Wilson. Steven Wilson is a very amazing prog rock musician who previously had the main band Porcupine Tree, but for the last little while he's been doing a more solo focused set of albums, and this song Pariah is from his upcoming album To the Bone, which I believe comes out very soon, so I can't wait to listen to the whole thing. The songs that have been released so far have sort of been all over the map in terms of his style, but my favorite of them so far is Pariah, because this one features Ninette Taib, and she had guest vocals on his previous album, and she has an amazing voice. I also need to listen to her solo work as well. And so this song does a great job of continuing on his tradition of very honest and personal lyrics with a really great crescendo to it, and her guest vocals really add to the song. So here's hoping that the rest of the album is of such astounding quality as this song. The next song on my playlist is Vex by Chelsea Wolfe. This is from her upcoming new album, Hiss Spun. And I sort of had a bit of a fanboy moment because this song features Troy Van Leeuwen on guitar and Aaron Turner on guest vocals. Troy Van Leeuwen is one of the main guitar players for Queens of the Stone Age, and Aaron Turner has been in many post-metal bands such as Sumac, Old Man Gloom, and also Isis. The band, it's a band. They're very good, or at least they were while they were around. And right from the start of this song, I could instantly hear the influence from these different bands. So, it was a combination I never thought I would want, but now that I've heard it, I'm just sort of shaking my head at myself, like, why didn't I think of this sooner? But I'm so glad it happened. The track has this very powerful organ to it. It's this sort of keyboard sound that wouldn't be out of place on the Oceanic album by Isis. And when Aaron Turner's vocals kick in near the end of the track, it really adds this extra layer of power. The other song from this album that's been released is 16 Psych, and that demonstrates a very doom metal influence, something I really liked on Chelsea Wolfe's previous album, The Abyss. So, all in all, I'm very excited to see how her new work turns out. On that note, I've also been listening to a lot of the band Isis, and this next song I have on my playlist is The Beginning and the End. So, Isis is a post-metal band. They've been around in the 2000s era, but their last album, Wavering Radiant, was in 2009. The band broke up then because they sort of felt they had done all they wanted to do. And I commend them for making that decision. It definitely takes a lot to do that, rather than just try to keep going constantly, whether or not things get stale. So, the beginning and the end, as I've mentioned, is from the album Oceanic. It's this whole story of this man finding out that his lover is in love with another man, so he decides to drown himself. It's a very sad story, but it really gives this sort of brutalness to all the real bone-crushing riffs on this album. And Aaron Turner, he's got such a great voice for metal music because there's a lot of power in his voice, but also behind this power you can hear pain. It's very noticeable on some of the last few tracks on the album, and some of the other songs on Wavering Radiant, like Threshold of Transformation. So, if you can get past the fact that unfortunately there is a terrorist organization that has the same name as this band, and look at it as just a band that was around far before and has no connection to, there's a lot of really enjoyable music there. The next song on my playlist is Master of the Universe by Hawkwind, and this I am using the live album, The Space Ritual. So Hawkwind is a psychedelic 60s, 70s space rock jam type band. They're very weird, they're out there. But for a little bit in their career, Lemmy, who eventually would go on to be in Motorhead, was in this band. And this live album, The Space Ritual, is when he was in the band. And all of the songs on here, they're just so jam-oriented, but so tightly organized. It's really great to listen to this collection of musicians just able to work off of each other so well. And Master of the Universe, it's pretty much based around one riff, but even though it's only one riff for the entire duration, it never gets stale because it's just got such power behind it. So if you want a real good 70s jamming type spacey band, but also with some proto-heavy metal in there, I would recommend this album a lot. I saw it on a list of best live albums, and I remember it was the only one that I hadn't listened to at that time, and that's why I decided to check it out. Definitely worth it. The next and second last song on my playlist is Adhere by Black Monolith. Now, for all of the Deaf Heaven fans out there, Black Monolith, I believe, features the guitar player who would normally play the rhythm guitar live for Deaf Heaven, if my sources are correct. But in any case, I could sort of see the two bands as being comparable. Black Monolith is like if you took the heavier elements of Deaf Heaven and focused more on those rather than the melodic parts. So it is definitely a very crust and black metal focused band, and the song Adhere has such great blast beats, D beats, and tremoloed guitars with very echoing and crunchy vocals. But at the same time, there are some melodic bits to the album that really shine, such as on the closing track. So, again, if you're a fan of Deaf Heaven, I would check out Black Monolith. And yes, they do have samples from 2001: A Space Odyssey. As a fan of that film, that doesn't hurt to have. And the last song on my playlist is Holy Mountains by System of a Down. System of a Down is a band that I feel kind of gets lumped in as like those early 2000s angsty, so edgy bands that were fun to listen to at the time, but we all sort of grew out of. And I don't really know if I fully agree with that. I think that they had a lot more interesting things to say and a more uniqueness in their style to justify not lumping them in that category. And the song Holy Mountains, I feel, is one of their most underrated. I could see the main riff in a different context, being almost in something like a Black Sabbath song. But they have such a unique style of vocal arrangements. If you've heard any song by them, you know what I'm talking about. So, overall, it's the two sort of separated at birth albums, as I like to say, Mesmerize and Hypnotize. And back to back, these albums are just really great the way they complement each other with their themes. There's a lot of songs that feel more about issues out there in the world, but there's also a lot talking about the things here right now. And if I recall correctly, Holy Mountains is about the Armenian genocide, as members of System of a Down are Armenian, and so they are very outspoken about that, and between the whole divide of the Armenians and Turkey. But I don't really have enough information to get into that and talk about that in a video about some songs I've been listening to recently. So let it be known that Holy Mountains is a great song. System of a Down is a great band. They have good music. And I think that's about all I have to talk about for some of the music I've been listening to recently. If you have any other recommendations of bands that are similar to any of these, feel free to let me know. And if you decide to check out any of these and end up liking them, let me know as well. I'm always open to recommendations because I always like discovering something new, and I hope you have as well.